Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the To-Do List. My special guest this time is Michael Hyatt, back for a specific talk about goals and having your best year ever. So welcome back, Michael.
Thanks, Eric. Great to be with you.
It is that time of year between, as of this recording at least, where it's between, Christmas and New Year's, and people are making all these resolutions, and you're coming out with this course, Best Year Ever, talking about goal making. So why are goals more important than, say, New Year's resolutions at this point in time? And why are you launching this now to counteract the whole 98% of New Year's resolutions never happen?
Yeah, well, I think it was just that realization that most people have these great intentions. They realize that next year is pretty much a blank canvas, and there's all kinds of possibility, all kinds of potential that's bound up in it. And yet when most people make New Year's resolutions, they're not following any kind of system. They're just basically articulating an aspiration or maybe a dream. But because they don't go all the way to create a goal, it doesn't really serve them. And most of them, as you pointed out, are abandoned in short order, and then people get on with their lives. But it doesn't have to be that way, and that's the thing that excites me about this course. So
let's give a disclaimer here. Before you even approached me about, hey, do you want to talk about this? I actually was sold. I knew from seeing the the promo videos of you talking about this, even though I co-wrote a book about goals earlier this year that's an ebook on Amazon, I still wanted to do a deeper dive from this course, and it delivers. I've gone through the 5 days, and wow, I'm going to go through it again. What is, this season here, this in between Christmas and New Year's, is it a strategic time and a place to look back, look forward, and set goals? And are there other times in the year that you would prescribe that be a method to use?
Great question. Yeah, this is that space that, I don't know if you're familiar with the writer Richard Rohr, but he talks about something called liminal space. And it's like the threshold on a door where you're not, you're between this room and that, you're in between two things. And that's kind of this week between Christmas and New Year's where it's a liminal space. The old year is not quite over. The new year hasn't quite begun. It's all full of possibility. And I feel like with this course, this is an opportunity to kind of catch a cultural wave when people are naturally thinking about new beginnings and how they can make this next year something extraordinary, and give it a little purpose and a little structure and a little direction so that people really give themselves an honest opportunity to accomplish what matters most to them in 2014. And you ask, are there other times of the year that are good? Yeah, I think most of us kind of recalibrate probably the middle of the year, but this year by far and away is the time when it's really on our minds.
And it's really about that transition time from like one year to another, you being somebody that used to be in the trenches of the publishing world. It's kind of that closing of the last chapter and the starting of a new one, or it's even the closing of the previous book in a series and you're ready to sit down and start the new Harry Potter, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's kind of a time also, Eric, where it's quiet. There's not a lot of interruptions. Everything seems to have slowed down a little bit, of course, unless you're in retail and you're processing all kinds of returns and stuff or gift cards. But for everybody else, it's pretty a slow time. I mean, I've talked to a lot of businesses this week or just shut down during this week. And we're kind of working this week. We've been working on the launch of this course, but, I gave my assistant time off. And, it's just a time when you can spend with family or spend on personal development, maybe read a few books. But again, most importantly, I think, is really set yourself up for an extraordinary year. Not just to accomplish your goals, but really to create, and this is the promise of the course, your best year ever. Why not?
Yeah, definitely why not? I think the why not is kind of that perspective shift that it really takes for you to realize, I don't just have to make resolutions that I start strong and even if I do start any at all and then I fizzle on and I start to fade out by January or February if you're lucky, but that there's this marathon type of a perspective that you can have on the year,
Yeah, you really can. I mean, it's like I'm going to be training for the Country Music Half Marathon in Nashville, Tennessee, which is on April the 27th. Well, part of what I've done in the process, it's actually one of my goals for this year, is to lay out a training plan. so that I've thought through it. How much do I need to run by the end of this week? How much by the end of the next week? And just, kind of map it out because, there's a lot of time between now and April the 27th. A lot of time for me to get off track, a lot of time for me to get lazy. A lot of things can happen. But at the beginning of this time, to lay out a training kind of regimen for myself and figure out how I'm going to get, step by step from here to that big race on the 27th.
Great. That's an excellent goal. So that's one of those things though, is just like, you're setting you with that has a certain deadline on it, and it's a certain distance, literally too, out from where we are right now in time and space, and then you're done. And so is there another maybe health goal? Let me ask you this. Is that a health goal for you, or is it a test of your endurance? Is it, what kind of perspective do you have on that? And do you have something else that maybe will take its place after you've completed that?
Yeah, that's a funny question because really it is a health goal for sure, but it's actually more than that. It's really a character goal. I remember one time, and I can't remember who wrote about this, but he was running the Boston Marathon, and he was running it with his daughter. And when they got to about, I don't know, it was, like mile 21 or 22, where it really gets tough in a full marathon. And his daughter said to him, "Dad, remind me again, why are we running this marathon?" And he said, "Well, because we're practicing not quitting."
Yes.
And I thought, that's a great perspective for running. So there is a sense in which it's character development too. But I find that usually in most, especially qualitative goals, like you're trying to improve your marriage or improve your health or something like that you need something that's more specific, that acts as a kind of a push goal or a focal point or something that's indicative of the larger goal that you're trying to accomplish. It just turns out that a half marathon is one way to measure fitness, and I know that a lot of things it will have to come into account. I'll have to watch my diet. I'll have to make sure I'm getting incremental exercise every week, and it just gives me something to press toward. Now, is there going to be another goal after that? Yeah, probably, but I haven't set that yet. So at the beginning of the year, I really believe you shouldn't have too many goals. I think 5 to 7 is the sweet spot. 10 is kind of the outside in my experience. If you get more than that, you really start diluting your resources and your ability to focus and give it the attention you need to follow through and actually succeed. So I'm not too worried about the goal after that. My guess is I'll probably run another half marathon in the fall.
And you'll be able to make a better choice on what that next goal is, having accomplished the first one, and you've got that momentum and that satisfaction of and pride in yourself in a good way that, hey, look, I did it.
Yeah, that's right. And, I've run the half marathon actually several times, so I get a little bit smarter each time and a little bit more intentional with my training. But I think it's true for a lot of goals. We start out, if we've never done that particular goal before, and we don't have a clue. We don't really know. We're just taking a guess. But that's fine. This doesn't have to be science. Nobody's going to write you up if you miss your goal. And there are a lot of goals. In fact, I had 9 goals for this last year, and I actually only accomplished 5. So 4 of them I missed. But I came pretty close on a couple of them. And some of them, if I hadn't had the goal, I wouldn't have gotten, off the starting block. So they're helpful even if you don't accomplish it, because sometimes at the beginning you can't see clearly. You're not sure exactly what you can do or you can't do. So you're just taking a guess. You're doing something that will give you direction and something that will be compelling. And this is hugely important in goals. Something that you find personally compelling that if you could accomplish would represent something significant for you.
Man, a lot of people are going to listen to that and say, man, what's wrong with you? How did you only get 5 of the 9? Or maybe that's your inner voice.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with that because I accomplished some extraordinary things this last year. And I'm really, really, really pleased with the way that the year turned out. But I attempted some big things. And again, I don't see missing those 4 as failure. And this isn't original with me. I don't even know where I got it. It may have been Tony Robbins, maybe a John Maxwell. But ultimately, there's no failure. For me, there's only feedback. There's only learning. There's only improving. So even if I miss those goals, I learn so much, and I'll be smarter on the next outing. A good example of that, like, the first time I ran the half marathon, I think my goal was 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I came in at 2 hours and 34 minutes. Well, did I fail? No, I had a goal for 2:20. I missed it by, 14 minutes, but that's okay. I ran the race and I completed the race and I felt like it was a resounding success.
Yeah, well, let me ask you that. What's your perspective on failure then? Because a lot of people talk about this word failure, and some will say there's no such thing as failure, or others say, oh, whatever, it was just a failure. Is the only failure is not trying again. Where do you kind of land on that?
Yeah, I kind of land on that side of it. I've been heavily influenced by John Maxwell's work on this. The idea of failing forward. Get your failures out of the way. If you learn from them, as long as you don't quit, they can be very productive. If you can learn something from it. So that's how I approach it. When I set a goal, I guess it was about a year and a half ago now, 2 years ago now, when I set a goal for 2012 that I wanted my book platform to hit the New York Times list. It felt really scary. It felt audacious when I typed that goal into Evernote. And I thought, oh my gosh, I kind of looked around the room like, am I allowed to do that? What if I miss? But you know what? What if I did miss? You know what would happen? Nothing. Nobody writes me up. Nobody penalizes me. I'm not fined. I just missed a goal. But I probably got a lot closer to it by having the goal than if I hadn't had the goal and just thought that maybe somehow accidentally I would drift towards that destination. That usually doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think that's the thing for me that's most changed in my life with, reading your blog and many others is just coming to that point of not accepting the passive mindset that I had before when it came to things in life that I wanted. Is if you don't make goals, nothing happens, So, you said you had 9 goals for this year and you met 5 of them. Well, then you met 5 more than the 0 you could have had by just sitting back and wishing for things,
That's exactly right. And I promise you, among those 5 were things that I would have never taken on if I hadn't had a goal. They're just not things that, in all the urgency and busyness of life, the important stuff gets crowded out. And the great thing about setting goals is that it gives you an opportunity to ask and answer for yourself what's important, not what's urgent, not what my boss is screaming for me to get done, or maybe even my family members, what they find urgent, but what do I find is congruent with my values and is really important. And that if I could lay out a plan, I could really move towards that instead of always being, pushed around by the urgency of the moment. That's why people end up out of health, in bad marriages, with their career going nowhere, because they're just giving their time to the urgent and not the important.
Oh, that's such a good point to just. That's the thing for me is just that, and actually that's one of the things I'm working on is just deciding. You know what? I'm going to stop being urgent about everything and start being specific about where my priorities lie. And if it doesn't fall into that rubric, then it's not going to make it on my radar.
It's hard though, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
really the culture doesn't look out for us. A lot of times the people that are closest to us, they have their own needs and that drives a lot of their behavior. And so they're not always looking out for our best either, though they probably think they are. But everybody is, looking out for their own best interests. And unfortunately, I think this is an appropriate place for self-care. And by that, I mean making sure that we put enough priority on the nurture of our own soul and our own spirit, our own personal growth, so that we can be more resourceful and more readily available to serve other people. And goal setting is one way to do that as well.
Yeah. And actually one of the things that I really love about the course is the fact that right from the beginning, you're talking about why personal reflection is such a great aspect to start with in terms of making goals. And I honestly, I was looking back and I realized that this year, in order to make good goals for this next year of 2014, I was looking back at 2013 for myself, and I realized, wow, I've gone to, or will have gone to by the time this year is over, 3 different funerals. And
Wow.
Right now in December 15th was actually the 10-year anniversary of my father passing away. And that stuff was, in my headspace, and I didn't even realize it. It started to, subconsciously start to affect, where I was going and what I was doing and what I was thinking about in terms of this past year. And what's ultimately great is, I just had the 50th episode, super episode on tools. And although you were way too busy to make it onto that episode, I'm glad to have you now, because one of the biggest things, thank you so much, was your journaling template that I've been using, which has really started to help me start to, unpack and almost sit myself down on the couch and take some time and self-analyze. You know what I mean?
Well, it's funny that you would mention that, and thanks for mentioning it. But, I go through that exercise every day when I journal, and I go through these questions that I ask myself, which basically enables me to unpack the previous day, because life is going so fast that oftentimes I can't even remember what happened yesterday without looking at my calendar, let alone processing it, making sure that I'm connected with it emotionally and that I'm completing it and I'm not dragging that along through my life unresolved. And then in the course, as you know, from day 2 in the Best Year Ever course, I talk about 7 questions to ask about last year. And I find that so many people have never sat down doing exactly what you're talking about, sitting down and asking themselves some questions about, what was the theme of last year? Or what did I accomplish that I wasn't acknowledged for? Or what were my regrets? Or, those kinds of questions that enable you to keep from inhibiting what could happen in 2014 because you haven't closed the chapter on 2013. And I find, for example, if people had a really tough year in the last year and they didn't accomplish the goals that they wanted to accomplish, and maybe they're a little discouraged or they feel like they've had a big setback, they're reluctant to dream. It's kind of a self-protective thing. They don't really want to think about setting goals for 2014 because they really haven't done business with 2013. Or another thing that sometimes happens is people have the opposite experience. They crushed it this last year. They had an unbelievable year. They're kind of exhausted, a little bit worn out. They're not quite sure if it was really worth the effort. So unless they can connect with that and process that as well, then it's very easy for them to drift and experience a setback in this next year because they didn't set a goal that was compelling that they could reach for this next year. As it turns out, Eric, happiness is a byproduct of making significant progress towards meaningful goals. And if we don't have goals and we're not making that kind of progress, it's very easy to get discouraged. Life seems like, like we're stuck. Like, what does this all mean? And where is it going? But if we have meaningful goals and priorities that are significant to us, and we're seeing that progress towards it, that's what psychologists say creates that sensation of being happy and being satisfied.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the things they talk about being why social media is so addictive, because, you can shoot off and send somebody a quick tweet, and if they reply, you feel like you've just done, and it can be, and it is work, but at the same time, you still get that endorphin buzz of, wow, I accomplished something. But really, if the time spent on that was equal to something that you had compiled and worked on something legitimate that's going to, maybe further your business or your goals or whatever, that the time spent in one place versus the other, your brain doesn't differentiate that, but the tangible results are what are differentiated.
Yeah, that's right. And I think those quick endorphin hits that come from social media or other things, are very transient. They don't last long. They're not ultimately fulfilling. And knit together, they don't make for a very fulfilling life. But when you're accomplishing meaningful goals in every area of your life, and by the way, these shouldn't be just in your career, but in every area of your life, and you kind of have that resilience, you have that sense of accomplishment and fulfillment, and ultimately that your life matters and there's some meaning to it.
Yeah, and so that's the thing is, like, sometimes we hesitate. I mean, you described it perfectly. I mean, basically, people have set these goals or only done some sort of vague resolution in terms of, I resolve to weigh less. Well, that doesn't really get you anywhere when you start off the year and you don't have any plan, and people don't even like making plans half the time, and then sticking to it is a whole other issue. And so it really comes down to, how do we start well? How do we work well or on accomplishing that goal? And then how do we finish well? What do you have to say about that?
Well, I do think it really matters that we're clear on the what first. What is it that we want to accomplish? And as you know, I talk about in the course, and other people have talked about SMART goals, and that is goals that are specific and measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. It's an acronym that stands for those 5 attributes, and sometimes people use other words for those attributes, but regardless, these are very specific. There's a deadline on them, and we know what the outcome is gonna be. And so to start with that destination in mind is more important than the how. And this is where I think people get kind of twisted up. Maybe they think, well, I'd like to do that, but I don't see how I could do it. Therefore, I'm going to, shoot that goal before I even start. I'm not even going to put it down. Well, most of the goals that are really meaningful, when you write them down, you won't be clear on the strategy. You don't have any idea how to accomplish it. In fact, I like to be not in the comfort zone with my goals, but intentionally in the discomfort zone. And I know I'm getting there, and this is like a Geiger counter that tells you when you're getting close to something radioactive. But when I begin to feel fear, uncertainty, and doubt, then I know I'm close. Now, I don't like to be, crazy about it. Like I have no illusions that I'm going to make the PGA Tour this year, as a golfer. And anybody that's ever seen me golf will understand how crazy that is. I mean, I might as well think that I would be play for the NBA, play basketball. That's not going to happen either. But so I'm not talking about crazy like that, but I am talking about where you're uncomfortable. And instead of running from those emotions and retreating to something that's familiar and something that's safe and something that's comfortable, they call it the comfort zone for a reason. Instead of retreating to that, embrace those emotions and go with them a little bit. Get out there where you're on the edge a little bit, attempting something that's going to be significant. Because unless you're outside of the comfort zone, in fact, to get outside of the comfort zone, you've got to have a breakthrough. And what most of us want, whether it's in our health, our most significant relationships, or our career, or our finances, what we really want is a breakthrough. We've gotten to the place where the status quo is no longer acceptable. And if that's you, then this course is designed for you, because it's designed to help you get out of your comfort zone, experience a breakthrough, and accomplish something that means something to you.
And that's the thing, is that if you're not feeling that fear, or you're not feeling, on a realistic goal, that is, that, hesitation, like, oh, I don't know if that's possible, that's the resistance, like, kicking up right before. And that's usually a good sign that, one, that's an area or a place in your life that does need changing, because you thought of it and it came to, it came up to the top of the water and you saw it. But two, that you then had that gut reaction of, oh, I don't know, because the resistance often is there to stop us before we start.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we've got to go with it, and why we've got to give ourselves permission to explore that. Again, what's the worst that can happen? This whole fear impulse probably served us at some point in history, when we were running from large mammals. And it can still serve us today when we're in dangerous situations physically. But that's so rare. Most of the fear that we experience has to do with psychological stress and, with situations where we're unfamiliar and personal growth and all the rest. But it's just like when you go to the gym, and you're working out with something, you typically, if you're going to grow muscle, you have to lift something heavier, that creates these micro tears in your muscle, and actually does a little bit of damage first so that the muscle can respond and grow and go to the next level. And that's a little bit how goal setting is. That you've got to stretch, you've got to do something that maybe you're not quite sure you're adequate to, or you have the resources for, because it's only in those situations that I think the resources and that we actually show up and come through in a big way when we put ourselves out there. If we don't do that, then we're going to keep getting the same old, same old. Yeah,
it's funny how, trite no pain, no gain is, but it's because it's true.
Yeah, it really is true. And it's easy to see that in the physical realm, but to intentionally put us there psychologically so that we can really grow. I mean, ultimately, what is it that we're trying to become? Are we trying to realize our full potential? There's so much in us, I think, that God, my own belief, that God put in us that's capable of coming out. But as long as we play it safe and stay in our comfort zone, we're not going to grow. We're not going to develop. We're not going to become all that he intended us to be. And to me, it's important. I don't want to get to the end of my days and look back and go, gosh, I was so scared. I kind of left it, I left it all in the box. I didn't ever want to get it out because I was afraid, that I might, lose a piece or screw it up in some way. No, I want to play full out. And if I make some mistakes, great, I'll recover. I believe that I'll recover and I'll keep moving forward.
Oh, that's so true. And that actually is a kind of an exhibiting of a different version of this fear, where so many people are begging to know, like, what's the best thing to start? Like, what should I work on? If I'm going to make this the best year ever, then since a year is a measurable and limited amount of time, if I use up that time on the wrong thing, and then that thing doesn't pan out, not only did I, quote unquote, fail at that one goal, I also now don't have time to start another.
Yeah, and the truth is you really do have plenty of time. Even if you don't deliver on that goal, even if you start it late, even if you got sidetracked in the middle, you can still get back on track. It's amazing what can happen when you give a little focus to it. And the beginning is usually not that hard. You think about it, like when you start a race, I keep using this metaphor of the race, but when you start a half marathon, have you ever run one, by the way?
Not a marathon. I've done 2 5Ks so far.
Okay, great. Well, you know what it's like. I mean, when you're at a race, and the half marathon in Nashville is like a lot of these big half marathons around the country, there'll be 30 to 35,000 people gathered at 7 in the morning for the race. And it's euphoric. Everybody's cheering. There's rock and roll music going. It's crazy. Your adrenaline's going nuts. Well, that's the beginning of the race. Now, let me just fast forward to the end of the race. That's exciting too, because you may be tired, you may be worn out, you may want to quit in the middle, but now the crowd's cheering because the crowds are at the beginning, at the end. The music's playing, you see the rope, or the ribbon. You run across that, your family and loved ones are cheering. That's awesome too. Those are the easy parts. The tough part is the messy middle. The part where you go for, feels like miles. It's not usually quite a mile, at least at the Country Music Half Marathon, where there are no crowds, no music, no nothing. There's a lot of other runners whose tongues are hanging out of their mouth too, panting, and you're wondering, am I going to make it? And I'm too invested to quit, but I'm not sure I've got the resources to go on. And it's what happens in the messy middle that really determines the outcome of the race, and in many areas of our life, determines the outcome of our lives. That's when we want to throw in the towel. And the thing that I like about having set goals where I'm very clear on the destination is that when I hit the messy middle, or when life gets tough, I've got something that's transcendent that's pulling me toward it. And if you do what I do on what I suggest on day 4, where you identify the inner motivations, your why, if you find your why for that particular goal, what's at stake, what will be lost if I don't complete it, what will be gained if I do, those are the things that can boost you in the middle of the race when you want to quit, when you want to give up.
Yeah, that's one of those things where people often, heck, Seth Godin wrote a book on it called The Dip, is where how do you know at what point do you push past kind of you've even referred to it, the inflection point. Yeah,
because there's so many times we want to give up. And as Seth talks about in that book, it's hard sometimes to know whether, this is like, God or the universe telling us we just need to throw in the towel because we weren't made for this, or whether we need to persist. In my own experience, Seth's may be different, but in my own experience, I find that persistence is kind of its own reward. So even if I should have given up earlier, or maybe this wasn't meant to be, there's value in persisting longer than I think I can hold out. Persistence is really, I think, a lost art for many people.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of that, like you said earlier with the metaphor of the father and the son running, it's that practice of not quitting, which isn't for the benefit of physical health or finishing the goal itself of running the marathon. To keep using that metaphor, it's the practice not quitting, which is a useful goal in all areas.
It is, and to have the ability, tenacity, perseverance, endurance, these are all character qualities that will serve us well in every area of our life. Because if you think about it, unless you win the lottery, most things in life that matter don't come easily. You think about, having a great marriage, again, it's almost like the marathon. It starts out with the wedding and it's beautiful. Maybe it ends well, maybe once you've worked through everything, but you don't get very far into it. A few years into it, and you start, for most people, we did in our marriage, we started hitting some difficult turbulence, two lives colliding together with different values, different personalities, opposites do attract. And as it turned out in our case, we were different in every area. And if we hadn't had this kind of overarching goal that we wanted a great marriage, we wouldn't have persisted. It would have been easy to, just take a pass and do what so many couples do. And, if there are people listening to this that have done that, I understand. I don't mean that to shame anyone, but I'm just illustrating the point that there is value in persevering, because once you work through that stuff, it's so much more rewarding, whether it's finishing a race or building a great marriage or raising your kids. It's totally worth it, but you got to persist.
And I know you're telling the truth because I've heard you and your wife talk about that on a 3-part series, Help, I Married an Entrepreneur, on your podcast. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and throw a link to that in the show notes of this episode. People should go check that out.
Right.
It was very awesome to hear you guys talk like that. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like if you push through, the pushing through is worth it in and of itself. The last time Jeff Goins was on the episode, I kind of asked him some questions about the In-Between book, and he was talking about what was it I brought? Oh, he talks about being a musician in that book so much in terms of that was what he was going to do. And obviously that's not what he's doing. He's a writer now. Right. But the fact is that he spent so much time on that passion of and practicing in public of doing music that it wasn't, he set me straight. He basically said, well, you take that practice that you worked on the one thing and then you apply it to the other thing. You don't wait, the effort's not wasted. You take the one thing, and if it doesn't pan out, you move it on to the other thing. You still practiced how to consistently do your craft, you know? So I'd suspect that almost, and you can tell me if this is right, of the maybe 4 goals that you didn't meet, you probably spun your wheels on those a bit, and it wasn't wasted effort because you either learned something from the not accomplishing, or it's spinning your wheels towards maybe something that's a goal for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I ended up smarter, more informed by the fact that I missed the goal, but now I have a more realistic assessment of what it's going to take to actually hit it on my next outing. So, that was hugely valuable. So, yeah, even when we miss, we win if we keep our attitude right and if we stay in the game.
So then maybe we don't. Let me rephrase. If there's if this is the best year ever, or hopefully it is, or it will be, and that's the intent. What if we want to think past just this year? What if we want to think in terms of like Dan Miller when he talks about 5-year goals, or things that take a lot longer to accomplish, that are like, the change your family tree type stuff that Dave Ramsey talks about when it's, getting out of debt, when it's not just a year or 2, it's maybe 2 to 3 or 4 year process like it's been for me and my family. How do you prescribe working on goals in this year, the best year ever, that then have that exponential change factor for the future?
Well, we don't probably have time to get into this, but one of the things I do, I wrote an ebook on creating your personal life plan. And so that's like the ultimate contextualization of all of this, in thinking in terms of your entire life. In fact, I spent this last year, one of the goals I did accomplish was I wrote the full-blown book of that called The Life Plan Manifesto, which will be out in 2014, another goal. But at any rate, that's like if I'm looking at, for example, what do I want to accomplish financially? Well, that's comprised in my life plan of a lot of different things. It's financial freedom, it's financial security, it's financial succession, being able to pass on what I need to pass on to wherever it's going to go, all of that. But the question when it comes to annual goals, and that's really what I'm talking about here in the best year ever, is what could I accomplish in this year? And I think that, this year is sort of a time frame that most of us can get our heads around because, just think about it. How fast did this last year go? Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it's gone already.
It's unbelievable. So, it's long enough that you've got a chance to make some course corrections and take some steps and all of that. But it's not so long that you're either tempted to procrastinate or it's just not even relevant because it's so far out there. So that's the thing I like about this sort of midterm goal. And I have goals that are 90 days and I have goals that are lifetime goals, but I like the 1-year goal because you can really make significant progress and accomplish significant stuff in a year-long period.
It's kind of that intermediary interval that allows you for course correction or, all right, well, that year I didn't make it, but I'm ready for this one.
Yep, absolutely. And the truth is you're going to live through this year more than likely anyway, so why not make it your best year ever? And that to me is kind of as I was thinking about it, when I started doing this several years ago, I thought, why would I ever set out to have a year that was like, say, a repeat of the last year? If it was a good year, great. But if it was not such a good year, why would I want to repeat it? Or even more to the point, why wouldn't I want to improve in it? Why wouldn't I want to play full out and do the very best I could with what I've been given stewardship over? My health, my family, my career, my relationships, my money. Why wouldn't I want to do the very best I can? And then if you string a few of those years together, could it be that you could have your best life? I think so.
Yes, yes. And that's the goal, isn't it? I mean,
It
ultimately, that's really when people are talking about productivity, that's really what they mean is I want to get all the stuff done that I want to do and have to do so that I can do more of the stuff that I want to do. And in effect, that's really, having your best life that you can have.
Yeah, I think so too. And we have the unbelievable, amazing choice in the Western world. This world that we've been born into is such a gift because we can make those choices. We're not born into a world, at least most of us, and I definitely recognize that there are millions, billions of people on the planet that don't have this choice. But in our world, we have to live the lives we've been given. And the truth is we've been given extraordinary freedom with many options, and we really can pursue the things that we feel called to pursue and make it our best year or our best life ever. And, woe be to us if we don't do that. It's one thing if you've been born into poverty or you've been born in a situation where you really don't have much control or much say over your future, that's one thing. But for those of us who've been given all this, to whom much is given, much is required. And I think that's us.
That's definitely us. Well, in thinking about setting goals for the year, do you have any kind of suggestion in terms of, I know you said 5 to 7?
Yep, 5 to 7.
And do you have any kind of, maybe variable size ideas in terms of maybe you want to see if there's one that's short and small and gives you momentum when you complete it earlier in the year because it was accomplishable, but it was still maybe a challenge to you. Like maybe there's a 5K that's coming in February and you do that or prep for that or something.
Well, one of the things that you're saying, Eric, that I think, first of all, I really appreciate, and I think that needs to be said, and that is you can't compare the season that you're in to somebody else's season. Mm-hmm. If a 5K is the biggest race you've ever run, then maybe a 10K is going to be outside your comfort zone, but it's something you could see yourself doing and probably something you could see yourself doing maybe even in the spring. So you get that sense of momentum. But maybe some goals are going to be a little bit bigger, and that's fine too. But you obviously want to make sure that they're smart, that they're seasonally appropriate, that they're few in number, and that, again, you find really personally compelling, that if you accomplish them, you feel good about what you've done. You're proud of it.
One of the things that Crystal Payne from Money Saving Mom said when she came on was that discipline begets discipline. And so if you start moving on these, and I guess this actually refers to your push goal of your marathon. Can you explain a little bit more about what a push goal is?
Yeah, I got this idea actually from Chalene Johnson, and she talks about identifying push goals. In fact, she has a whole book called Push. But the idea is that there's probably one goal in your set of goals that if you could accomplish it would act as a sort of domino and make all the others fall more readily. So, for example, in 2012, for me, I just knew that if I could get my book platform on the New York Times bestsellers list, that would be a push goal that would enable, my speaking engagements, the quality and the quantity of those to improve, consulting, everything I wanted to accomplish was kind of dependent, or at least would be significantly helped by me accomplishing that one goal. This last year, my push goal happened to be Platform University because I thought that would accomplish a lot of things I wanted to accomplish in my personal life and financially and a lot of other ways. So that was a push goal. So the idea is to take whatever goals you have and to ask yourself the question, of all of these, which is the one that if I could accomplish it may not even be the most difficult, but if I could accomplish it, it would knock down some of the other goals or allow me to make progress faster towards those goals if I could accomplish it. So I would just asterisk that one or mark it in some way as your push goal.
Okay. And then in terms of the amount of goals, do you kind of mix those up across the board in terms of, personal, professional, family, career, all those kinds of things? Yes.
I think it's really important for us to say this too, Eric, because I think if people have had any exposure to goal setting, it's typically in the context of their career or job. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about that, but we're talking about more than that. You really should have goals across in every part of your life because you're a whole person. And these things seep into one another and relate to one another. If you allow yourself to come unwound in your health, for example, and you get sick or you have a major health crisis, it's going to impact your work. It's going to probably impact your marriage. It might impact your parenting. Or on the other hand, and I've experienced this firsthand with a guy I used to work for whose marriage came unraveled, and it was like the opposite of a push goal. It dominoed or cascaded into every area of his life and even his career. And he ended up getting let go from this job. And it wasn't because he was in the process of going through a divorce. It was because the impact of that divorce affected his work so much that he just wasn't performing on the job. All this stuff is interrelated. That's why we have to approach our life as a seamless whole. We have to see the whole thing and work on every aspect. I want to take care of myself physically, for example, so I can be available to my wife and I can be available to my children and now my grandchildren. If I'm not feeling energetic, if I'm drained, if I'm not in good shape, then I'm going to be less able to relate to them or be with them in a way that I want to be with them. I want to have the energy, and believe me, trust me, your grandkids take enormous amount of energy.
Well, yeah, if they're anything like the two kids that I have right now, they will be.
The good news is we can send them home with mom and dad.
Yes. Yeah, dressed like Woody. I've seen the picture of your grandson, who is very cute. That's awesome. Yeah, that's one of the things actually working through the course for myself. And again, I mentioned the funerals and then the 10th year anniversary of my father passing. I realized, well, one, that's got twofold, touching on it, like what you just said, was health and family. And which is why I've been really kind of deciding, okay, how do I construct a tenfold or a dual-fold, I guess, kind of a goal, health-wise, family-wise, that's me taking care of me first, but also then not neglecting, my current responsibility to being there for my family now, and not just saying, well, I'll be there for them later when I'm healthy, but right now it's all about me,
Yeah. Oh, and I tell you, so many people make that mistake, and there may not be tomorrow.
Yeah.
So you've really got to focus in on this stuff now because, and I tell that story, you may recall in the series where I talk about going snorkeling with Gail in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
we got caught in a riptide, and we got pulled way off of where we thought we were going. We just thought we were out, snorkeling and enjoying all the stuff we were seeing under the water. But we got caught in this riptide and drifted way out from where we should have been. And it took all of our effort to swim back to shore. And I think for many people, that's how life is. It's not that they set out to screw up their lives. They don't set out to ruin their marriage or ruin their health. Nobody gets up and says, hey, I think this year that's what I'm going to accomplish. But they drift towards that because that's just the nature of inertia. That's the nature of sort of the status quo, is that you're going to, the second law of thermodynamics? Things tend toward disorder. Mm-hmm. It's true in your health. It's true in your marriage. It's true in your career. Unless you counteract that with something positive like goal setting, where you're going to swim against the current and go in the direction of your dreams.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, so sharing a little bit with you publicly here about, where my thoughts are in terms of what my own personal goals are makes me think of another question, which is, some people are kind of one way or the other with this about how public do you go with your goals? Do you put them out there in public for you and your tribe and your platform to, work on together? Or do you keep them private and only for a select few for accountability's sake?
Well, I used to think you share them with anybody and everybody. In fact, I used to blog them. But then I saw, like you've probably seen, that Derek Sivers' TED video where he talks about why you shouldn't go public with your goals. And based on the research he compiled there, he talks about the fact that you get the same sense of psychological accomplishment in talking about the goals as you do in actually accomplishing them. So it kind of sabotages the whole effort. I actually come down in the middle of that. I think you should share your goals, but only with people that will support you and hold you accountable. Sometimes that can be our family or our close friends. Sometimes no, because they're cynical or they're negative or they're going to poo-poo it or, distract us or work against us, actively sabotage us. And so I would be very selective about it. But I do think it's worth sharing with the people that can help us get to the destination, who will hold us accountable and increase the probability of us accomplishing it.
That's funny because back, let's say, I don't know, let's say, I'll take a guess and say August. I decided to text a mutual friend of ours, Cliff Ravenscraft, and I said, hey, do you got time for a quick call? And he said, sure. So I call him up and I say, so this is going to sound crazy, but what do you say about us like doing accountability partnering where, you know, we want to get up early, we want to get our steps in with our Fitbit, we want to, you know, start working on the whole fitness goal thing that we've, you know, I don't know if you've been following along with what he's been doing or did in October. That kind of was the catalyst for all of that for both he and I was just, you know what? We're not happy with where we're at. We want to be somewhere else. We've made strides in that direction before. We've kind of drifted back again, but we know it's still important and we don't want to give up. How about, and I said to him, how about we just keep this between you and me? And so, because we'd both done that before where he'd done the whole big, you know, gung-ho, all right, the GSPN community is going to get behind all of us walking and running and getting fit, and it benefited a ton of people, and he and Stephanie and myself and a bunch of others like just got so much healthier. And it's been seasons, many seasons since then. But you know, I just felt now's the time. Now's the time. At least if we don't get to where we want to get, that we at least make progress and learn from it, even if we quote unquote fail. And I think he would tell you, I think I've heard him say it, is like, it really was a catalyst. Like, it's one of those things where, you know, for a while there, he wasn't going public, but then he was like, you know what, I can't help it. That's just my nature. So
I know that's true.
He even asked me, he's like, hey, can I tell people your name or do you want me to just keep it? I'm like, go ahead. I don't care. It's fine. You know, so I think there's big things going to happen in that area in the next coming season.
Well, this is kind of the premise, and I know you're kind of a gadget geek like I am, but this is kind of the premise behind applications like Lyft, and now there's a new one called Strides, and it kind of gives you that social affirmation or that social support that you need to accomplish goals, and I'm all for that. In fact, that was one of the things as we were crafting the 5 days to your best year ever course. I said to my team, I said, I want to have community built into this because I think that people are doing this, have a certain camaraderie and a shared passion around this where we could really help one another as we share with people that we know are going to support us, they're going to hold us accountable, and it's a safe environment where we can do that. So we've got that inside the course.
Yeah, community is so important. That shared, you know, in the Lyft app itself, giving you props for having done your stuff. In fact, actually what's crazy about that is my next episode of this podcast is my conversation with Tony Stubblebine, the CEO of the Lyft app. And he goes some places that I didn't even know were possible in terms of all this. So stay tuned for that one.
Yeah,
Plug.
Those guys are really developing.
Yeah,
I'm impressed.
Yeah, and Tony himself, like I followed him on Twitter after I talked to him, and just the stuff he's tweeting out, like look him up. He is one who's really talking about, you know, cognitive budget and things like that I wasn't even aware of were things, and now I do, and it's changing my life. It's changing my mind space in terms of what I think about, in terms of what's possible in the messy middle, honestly.
Do you know what his Twitter handle is?
I think it's just Tony Stubblebine.
There it is.
That's probably too long. Well, yeah, there it goes.
No, that's it.
Yeah. You just take a look at some of his tweets and you'll see, like, he's going places that I think is the cutting edge in terms of, again, that messy middle, that place where we've started something, we want to finish it well, and how can we optimize our workflows to do that?
Well, man, I'm all for using
So check it out.
Technology we can use.
Yeah. So, well, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit specifically about the course itself, how people can get plugged in, what it is specifically, and why people should do it. I think we've given enough of a why, but I think if anybody has any doubts now, we should talk about that.
Yeah, well, what the course is essentially it's a video course, and the premise behind it is if you're willing to invest at least 5 hours, and you can do this for an hour a day over the course of 5 days, or you could do it in one sitting. And I tend to think it's better if you do it over the course of several days, but it doesn't really matter, whatever your schedule will allow. But if you could make that investment to get the outcome, to come to December the 31st and actually have accomplished what you set out to accomplish, or enough of your goals that you could look back and say, that was a great year. That's really what I'm trying to accomplish with the course, is to help people get there. And so each day begins with a short video segment, and I've listened to video courses. In fact, I'm working through one now where the video seems to go on forever. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to have something short and succinct, cut to the chase, show me the beef, so to speak. I think I just mixed a metaphor, but get to it. Tell me what I need to do. And then I've got a workbook in the course too, where you have an exercise each day and you work through that portion of the exercise. So the first day is all about the possibility of breakthrough. The second day is all about processing the past and really kind of unpacking 2013 so that you don't drag the negative parts of it into 2014, but you do extract the positive parts of it and use that to lift you in 2014. Day 3 is all about setting SMART goals and getting really clear on what you want. Day 4 is about identifying your why and your inner motivations and what's going to keep you going when the going gets tough. And then day 5 is where the rubber meets the road. How do you execute against that and actually make incremental progress against your goals so that you get to the end of the year having accomplished what's important to you? So that's pretty much it. There's a community inside the course. There's the video. There's the workbook. There's the community. And then there are a couple of bonuses that are pretty cool too, which I just finished the last one today.
Yeah. Are you going to just tease that, or do you want to tell us what it is?
No, I can tell you what it is.
Cool.
Yeah. So the first bonus is, do you know Stu McLaren?
Yes.
Yeah. Stu's the founder of Wishlist Member. He's also the co-founder of Platform University, who's become one of my dearest friends. But he interviewed me on my answer to the 7 questions about 2014. So I just kind of lay it all out there. I tell him exactly, unpack the good, the bad, and the ugly from last year, and we talk through that. The second bonus is my template for a productive day, and I talk about engineering or re-engineering your morning ritual. And it's what technology I use and what do I try to accomplish in that time to set up my best day ever. And then the third bonus, the one I just finished today, I am calling a beginner's guide to task management. How do you take these goals? How do you take the projects that are meaningful to you? And how do you populate your daily task list with the steps that will get you toward those goals? So I talk about the app that I use, which in my case is Noseby. And I mentioned that this will work with any technology, but this is the particular one that I use. And then I just kind of go through that. And it's an audio lesson with a workbook. And those are the 3 bonuses.
That's awesome. I'm glad to know I already have those then.
Good. You do.
That's
They're
great.
Actually, they won't be up until January the 1st. It says that inside the course, but yeah, they're done and in the can.
That's great. And if you're like me, I mean, you'll get into the course and you'll go through it, realize that it's exactly what you need, and then want to go through it again. And so that's kind of what I do. That's what I do with like business books, is honestly skim through them fast, mark places where I want to come back and like really do a deep dive. And that's what I'm planning on doing after New Media Expo, which is quickly approaching. So
no, this weekend.
Yes.
But I do the same thing. I go through the stuff that matters like that. I go through it more than once.
So if people want to go do that, I think you've actually given me an affiliate link, which is very generous, which is what? bestyearever.me/Eric?
Yes, Eric with a K.
Eric
Your
with a
audience
K.
knows that, but
Yes.
in case somebody else is listening, Eric with a K.
So if you go through that link, hey, you help support this show, which is really cool because I like making this show. So if you've enjoyed this, if you've enjoyed all of this, a lot, honestly, what's funny is we've talked for almost an hour on goal setting, and really we've barely scratched the surface of what's in the course.
So true.
And so this, if you don't see that as incentive for setting up your life and actually making goals instead of failing at resolutions, then I don't know how to help you. This is what you need.
I so think that's true. And the other thing I think we'd be remiss to not say, Eric, on that affiliate link is that it also gives your listeners a discount that they can't get anywhere else.
That's true. I had forgotten that.
Yeah. So it's actually cheaper if you go through the affiliate link than if you just kind of go through the general page.
Yeah.
So just another incentive to use it.
Yeah. So definitely check that out. Go to I was going to say beyond the to-do list. Best year ever. Good URL placement. bestyearever.me/Eric with a K. And check that out. There's a ton. There's actually that'll take them right to the promotional videos where they'll be able to watch you talking about the course a little bit more as well, right?
Yeah, and the great thing about that, there's actually 3 short videos there that actually teach you about goal setting, and that content's free. You don't have to buy the course. You don't have to do anything. You do have to opt in to get the second and third video, and then you have the opportunity, if you want at that point, to go ahead and buy the course. If you don't, that's fine. And I would just say to people, Eric, if you don't use my goal setting system, use somebody's. This is too good of an opportunity this year that's before us to pass. So do something, even if it's somebody else's course. I don't care. Just get in motion.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Michael, it has been awesome to talk with you again. And actually, I can't wait. I'll shake your hand in a few days when you speak at New Media Expo.
I know. I can't wait to be together.
So that'll be awesome. So,
Thanks,
thank you so much for coming. Whew. So, you know what to do. That was another awesome conversation on this show. And that's just the reason I do it is life change. It's being the best you can be, which sounds almost like an Army commercial, but still, it's because it's true. Again, trite things become true, or true things become trite, whatever. Anyway, you get the picture. You need to set goals. Like Rick Calvert said last episode, you owe it to yourself to make yourself better, and even better at what you do. And setting goals is what's going to make that happen. And so check out Michael's course at bestyearever.me/Eric. That's ERIK. Or like Michael said, if you're not going to do that, do mine. Buy the ebook at beyondthetodolist.com/goals. I'm sure, as the person who wrote that book, that even doing that much of a step forward in goal making and changing of your life, you will find that there are deeper ways to do that, which is why, again, I went ahead and I got Michael's course myself anyway. Do one, do the other, do both. But the links are there. And again, the show notes for this episode are at beyondthetodolist.com/53. I'm Eric Fisher, and I'll see you next time.